Hello. So this is going to be the first of maybe some others. I don't really know. But it's going to be a kind of freestyle book talk about whatever book I've just completed. I just got back into reading after a couple of years of just not making the time for it, doing audiobooks and things of that nature. And so in addition to finishing some books that I was attempting to read years ago, as well as rereading a fiction book. It's the Stormlight Archive currently. I'm going to read through the entire Cosmere of my hardbacks that I've collected that I have not yet read, even though I've listened to the entire Cosmere 3 times except for the Stormlight Archive, which I'm reading it through on this time. So I don't know if I'll do any fiction book reviews, but in the mornings I try to read at least a chapter of something that will stimulate me to think. And challenge my worldview. And so previously I finished The Art of Dreaming by Carlos Castaneda on a recommendation of a friend who's worked his way through the whole series. And I'd like to actually have an interview with him where he talks about the whole series and his impressions of it. And I can talk a little bit about what I encountered with The Art of Dreaming, which was good. But after I finished that, I went on to Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson. Now, oddly enough, this does not have an about the author inside, which is fitting. So I can't tell you when he was born, when he died. I believe this book was written in 1981, though. And it was given to me by a friend about 2 or 3 years ago. I began reading it and got probably about halfway through, I would say. Very close to. It's one of those books that you don't just breeze through. There are actually experiments at the end of each chapter that are designed to challenge the reader, to challenge their own preconceived opinions and held beliefs and sacred cows and reality tunnel as a whole, and begin to lead one to really question truth about everything. Robert Anton Wilson would say that he did not believe anything, and it's something that I've found myself saying a number of times over the years, is because to believe is to think something is true that you don't know. And so there are things that you can take for granted that the ground's going to hold me up, but there is a chance that it might might not. But so we operate on things that we think we are true, and we word it in our minds that way. Because he talks a lot about Korzybski, Alfred Korzybski, I believe, and Science and Sanity, which I have printed off. I printed off one of the PDFs, and eventually I'd like to go through it, but I'm going to have to figure out how to make sense of it printed out the way it is. And Korzybski talked a lot about how semantics, is considered the father of semantics, if I understand correctly, and he talks a lot about how our words create our reality tunnel and reinforce our reality tunnel. So the way we talk about people and objects and ourselves really reflect our mindset. And so paying very close attention to how you word things, what words mean. And a good example I like to use is that there is no true separation. That's, a mystical concept, and it's talked about in here, which I delight in finding things like that. But there is no true separation. There is only distinctions within a whole, in that there is no separateness between us. It's not some mystical woo-woo mumbo-jumbo. We know this through pretty much every field of science, whether it's ecology or it's quantum physics. Like, we are part of the same thing doing its own thing, but we're linked to one another. We require one another. We require these trees. We require the sun, all of this for life to be able to be done out the way we experience it here. And so we are connected to that. And there are distinctions, but we're not actually separate. And when you begin to apply that to everything, you begin to see yourself in more of symbiosis rather than, fighting against each other and stuff like that. Less identified with things as yours and mine. It's like, well, no, we're actually experiencing this all together in this. And it evokes a level of gratitude and respect for life. And that begins to come out in your thing. So in framing the mind intentionally framing the mind through language, to not perceive yourself as separate from people, then you begin to see them less as an enemy and more as someone you're just not vibing with, and so you work towards that a little bit more, and that's just through the framing of the language. And so that comes up a lot in here, and really defining terms and things of that nature. This book is a really heavy read. It's nonfiction. It's his modification and presentation of the 8-circuit model created by Timothy Leary, which is an attempt to describe the stages through which a human goes from, I guess you consider pre-birth, the uterine world, to birth and infancy, and childhood, adolescence, all the way up as one grows up, and that these different circuits of the brain are active during these times, where we're prone to certain types of action. We're exploring the world in various ways, and then able to walk, and then able to talk, and all of this stuff. But that evokes different things in our mammalian brain and things of that nature that we have to wrestle with. And then we are also blessed and cursed with the gift of cognizance in the sense, and sapience in the sense that we can reflect on a past, and we can project a future, and therefore we can worry about that future, and we can regret the past, and so we can live in stressed out states, even when there is no immediate danger. And so that causes different things. And so as you go up the circuits, you see these different things activating in the developing human, and then they kind of get conditioned in through the way we socially reinforce those things, and the way we sensorily perceive things, to a certain pattern. And he projects that there is the capability of humans to supersede even that, and not in the sense of fighting against or looking at it with disgust, but more with understanding and curiosity and wonder at, like, wow, look at this crazy little human robot thing go that's just been wound up and released into the wild. And in the observing of that, you are able to train the awareness, I guess, that is actually present within the self, that is observing all of this stuff, that basically kind of goes into a hypnotic trance and gets into these repetitive actions. And so his argument is that as you do this, you basically get gifted and go up into these higher circuits of being. I don't have anything in particular that's that I want to actually read, but I'm in the habit of marking up my books. And so what I thought I'd do is flip through a couple pages and read a couple of the sections that I obviously found interesting at one point. I did want to look at the thing and at least say what the circuits are. So there is the oral biosurvival circuit, the anal emotional territorial circuit, the time-binding semantic circuit, the moral socio-sexual circuit, and they're not listed in the chapter headings after that. But those do cover the base ones that we all kind of get wrapped up in. It's the fifth and higher that begin to ascend. So maybe we'll find some of those as we flip through. So let's just go. Okay, I happen to... see. This is from the introduction by Wilson himself, and I just have part of this underlined. So, I agree with outlaw radio star Travis Hipp that the paranoia and depression result inevitably from the ignorance. These kids not only don't know anything, they don't even want to know. They only realize vaguely that somebody has screwed them out of something, but they don't have enough zest or bile to try to find out who screwed them and what they were screwed out of. I put underneath it, want to bet? And let's see. Saw one a second ago when I was flipping through. All right. We'll read the end of this part here, this other part of the introduction. If so, then the title of this book, Prometheus Rising, is representative of more than a catchy title to a profound, fascinating book. It becomes a title instead to the very attempt which we are now making to reach beyond ourselves with a quantum leap into a new world which has been envisioned only by a few. Wilson is one of this group who are preparing themselves, and if we allow them, the rest of us, to take our place in the new aeon. I will close with a quote from Wilson. We are all giants raised by pygmies who have learned to walk with perpetual mental crouch. Unleashing our full stature, our total brain power is what this book is all about. Now, the introduction was also written by Israeli Regarde. I hope I pronounced that right. All right, so let's read this one. I've apparently annotated a section here, so it's from chapter 1. In the long run, we are hopefully approximating closer and closer to objective truth over the centuries. In the short run, Orr's law always holds. Whatever the thinker thinks, the prover will prove. And if the thinker thinks passionately enough, the prover will prove the thought so conclusively that you will never talk a person out of such a belief. Even if it is something as remarkable as the notion that there is a gaseous invertebrate of astronomical heft, God, who will spend all eternity torturing people who do not believe in his religion. There's an asterisk underneath the prover will prove from earlier. If the reader is a scientist, do not be alarmed. This refers not to you, but only to those benighted fools in the opposite camp who refuse to recognize that your theory is the only reasonable one, of course. And I put ha 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 underneath there. I wrote here, individuals will only ever do what they think is either right, proper, or justifiable based on the awareness at the moment of action. So that is a modification on an idea presented in the Science of Man, most notably by Rondell Gibson and Phil Blecker. And it is that you can only ever do what you feel is either right, proper, or justifiable at the moment of the time that you do it. Everything that you're doing is going through that filter. You cannot do something that you actually feel is evil, because when you're doing it, you have to justify it somehow. I'm doing this because someone did this to me, or I'm getting revenge, and so this is okay. People never actually do what they think is evil. They're doing it because they have a reason for it, or in this situation, this is proper. It's okay to treat this person in this situation because of X. And so, yeah, that is the nature of understanding. When you just give account that everyone is always doing that, and you recognize that we're all locked into our own reality tunnels through years of conditioning, and so we're basically wound up and programmed in the same way that everyone else is, and that extends a level of love that is not romantic. It is not just friendly. It is not just, oh, I love hot dogs or actual dogs or whatever. It is a level of understanding that, compassion and empathy on a grand scale to other people. And so you don't hate people for doing what they do. Even if what they do, you're just like, that was really stupid. From that point of view, that was the right thing to do for whatever, justifications or properness or whatever. And that doesn't mean that in the split second after you smack somebody upside the head that you go, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Because now the appropriate thing is, well, either defense or apology or both, or, but each moment is either right, proper, or justifiable to the person. And so, yeah, that's another little tidbit. But it all fits in. It's why I like reading things like this. The book I'm actually started now is called The Starseed Transmissions. It's by Ken Casey, and it's a channeling thing that happened to him when he was snowed into a cabin for 11 days at some point. I don't know when it was actually written. And he believed he had these transmissions from either extraterrestrial life or aliens, and so he wrote this stuff down. But in reading just the introduction, I realized, this guy, if nothing else, had a mystical experience while in supreme isolation and quiet, and was no longer able to run away from his thoughts and what he thought was going on in the world and what life was And these are the results of that. And whether that was his intuition coming out, whether he intentionally just decided he wanted to write it in this form, that's, whatever, or whether he was actually contacted. But I like seeing how other people talk about reality, because you'll always find things where, especially if the person, you can tell if the person has a good heart, because it will come out in their writings and through whatever medium they're channeling, and you can always gain something from it. But it's definitely in the practice. It's a fitting follow-up to this, because he loved to challenge you to go read another book and get in that headspace, and see what it would be like to have been born and raised under a certain regime or in a certain time period, and what your mindset would be like then, and not judge it from an enlightened, 21st century personality, essentially. So so there's all sorts of little drawings and stuff in there that he did in here, for various things, and different things from different books. There's a lot of things from Crowley and whatnot in here. Let's see. Here's some. Okay. In Schrodinger's phrase, life feeds on negative entropy. Life is an ordering, selecting, coherence-making process. Without getting embroiled in metaphysics, life, evolution, behaves as if it were always aiming at higher coherence. Example, higher intelligence. This process accelerates because it is, as Shannon demonstrated mathematically, logarithmic. Logarithmic processes are such that if you put them on graph paper, the curve rises more and more all the time. Hence, the accelerations noted by Adams and Korzybski are human increments in a process that has been innate in evolution all along. The human increment accelerates faster than pre-human evolution because through the third semantic circuit, its symbols, words, maps, equations, etc., we are able to pass information, negative entropy, coherence, from generation to generation. Worldwide wealth in terms of real capital, plants in operation, actual known resources, etc., has been doubling every generation since economists started collecting statistics in the 18th century. Where does all this wealth come from? According to orthodox economists, it comes from land, labor, and capital. According to Marxists, it comes from land and labor alone, and the capitalist is a thief who has inserted an artificial bookkeeping system into the process. Both are wrong. Land and labor alone, and land, labor, and capital together can't produce new wealth if they are all organized by a fallacious idea, such as searching for oil where oil is not. The real source of wealth is correct ideas, workable ideas, that is, negative entropy, information. The origin of these coherent, workable ideas is the human nervous system. All wealth is created by human beings using their neurons intelligently. I'll just keep going because I underlined another part down here. A neurotic young man once went to a Zen master and asked how he could find peace of mind. "How can you lack anything," the Roshi asked, "when you own the greatest treasure in the universe?" "How do I own the greatest treasure in the universe?" asked the young man, baffled. "The place that question comes from is the greatest treasure in the universe," said the master, being more explicit than is common for a Zen teacher. Of course, as a Buddhist, the master had taken a vow of poverty and did not mean exactly what we mean here. But he knew that the brain produces all that we experience, all our pain and worry, all our bliss states and ecstasies, all our higher evolutionary vistas and trans-time peak experiences, etc. It is also the greatest treasure in the universe in the most materialistic economic sense. It creates all the ideas which, socially employed, become wealth, roads, scientific laws, calendars, factories, computers, life-saving drugs, medicines, ox carts, autos, jet planes, spaceships. If you are not alone in the wilderness, lift your eyes from the page and look about. All that you see, whoever theoretically owns it, is in the time-binding product of the materialized or manifested ideas of creative men and women. It is all negative entropy, coherent order, and it is all moving towards higher and more coherent order at a faster rate of change all the time. Oh, yeah, there's a lot there. I don't know that I really need to expand on that. He really drives it home. I love the idea where he lays out the idealist of the Marxist and the idealist of the capitalist. And it's like, no, this like we need things that work, and we don't need to get stuck in an ideology. We need to like use what works and continue to question things and to continue to push for innovation. I think that's what we get hung up on, whether it's political parties or racial issues or even sex-based ones. It's all just more lines in the sand. It's just unnecessary. We could just be working on finding what works and stop getting puffed up. We can balance each other out. We can hone each other, sharpen each other like steel sharpens steel, and spar rather than actually go into combat. And it would be interesting to see. I'm not an idealist in the sense that I believe anything would save humanity or that humanity necessarily even needs saving. I think that the resistance of living, leads us to higher levels of consciousness if we learn to work with it and be grateful for the challenge and rise to those challenges. So I don't know that the world needs to be better in any sense, but it would be interesting to see what would happen if a more cooperative and harmonious, communication began and led to, just new opportunities of cooperating and being more symbiotic with each other as a people and then our planet before we decide we need to go to Mars or anywhere else. Here's one. True conspiracy does exist when a group conceals evidence, spreads deliberate misinformation, and coerces or terrorizes witnesses. Any affinity group approaches such behavior to the extent that members reinforce each other's participation in the group reality tunnel, especially concerning such crucial epistemological matters as what is important enough to notice and discuss as against what is trivial and better ignored. How coercive do we have to be to intimidate witnesses? Most people, as our snafu principle explains, are easily led to reporting what an authority figure wants to hear. So, that he's talking a lot in that chapter about like the idea of secret police, and then you need a secret police to watch that secret police to make sure that they don't get too powerful, and then you need a secret police to police that, and there's a constant desire for the eye on the pyramid to see behind it, in the sense of it's got to be in control, so it's got to know everything, but in that it creates these opportunities for power and usurpation, if that's an actual word. And so, yeah. It's interesting to basically just remember that don't just write off everything that you hear as like, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, it's crazy, it's nut job. It's like, look into it, entertain it. You don't have to live in fear of it like anything else, but there are actual conspiracies out there. I don't know which ones are true and which ones are not, but as he defined it, those types of conspiracies do exist. So don't just be taken in and naive. Don't be the fool in the tarot all the time. Actually test things. So some of the exercises, we'll go with this one. So exercises at the end of this chapter. 1, start collecting evidence that your phone is bugged. So the idea was to kind of get yourself into a paranoid state to experience what it's like, so you can understand what other people would be going through and why they would do certain things. 2, everybody gets a letter occasionally that is slightly damaged. Assume that somebody is opening your mail and clumsily reading it, and so you get yourself all worked up into that. And, 3, look around for evidence that your coworkers or neighbors think you're a bit queer and are planning to have you committed to a mental hospital. Some of these are just fun, like, thought experiments to just kind of see how you would initially react, and then to see, how you might actually work with it, and where you might actually believe that's real. It's crazy. 4, try living a whole week with the program "Everybody likes me and tries to help me achieve all of my goals." And so that kind of hints back to the thinker thinks and the prover proves. seeing just how you can create a reality tunnel that justifies, what you want. 5, try living a whole month with the program. I have chosen to be aware of this particular reality. Now that's a challenging one. Like, all the other ones seem silly, but when you get to that one, it's like, okay, because it doesn't have any bias on it. It's, I have chosen to be aware of this particular reality for a month. Like, that's what you come back to. That's your centering, like, mantra kind of thing almost. When you experience things, remind self, I've chosen to be aware of this particular reality. And you're observing this. And so that keeps you clear from getting identified and all riled up in emotions like fear, anger, guilt, and insecurity, and seeing things falsely and getting paranoid and worried and things of that nature. Instead, you're able to clearly operate within what's going on. Number 6, try living a day with the program. I am God playing at being a human being. I created every reality I notice. Assume that God is the answer to Da Free John's question, who is the one who is living you now? So that's definitely taking a step into the mystical experience. I've had those just happen enough over the past decade or so that I don't really have to play with that one. That's one that's pretty ingrained, and it's fascinating. But for someone who hasn't had a mystical experience, like if you were to work your way through those, like it'd be interesting to see if you had one, and because like I said, just do it for a day, but I'd be interested in what the psychological effects after that would be. 7, try living forever with the meta program. Everything works out more perfectly than I planned it. And that's one of living in gratitude, in the sense of, like, just because you've started working towards a certain goal, which I like to call aims, because you don't get hung up on, like, well, that's my end point. It's like, instead of an aim, is like you're constantly aiming it and trying again to get, to hit that aim. It gives you something to constantly move forward. And I kind of forgot where I was. Everything works out more perfectly than I planned it. So you moving towards an aim, then you don't get hung up when you miss. It's like, okay, well, just realign, refocus, continue putting my intention in that thing. You don't go, oh, I wanted to get that, but I didn't get it, or I couldn't get it in time or whatever, and you get sad about it. Instead, you just continue being like, I would still like to do this. I would still like to go skydiving. So it's like, I didn't get to, I missed this opportunity that was right there, but I want to do that. And you keep putting intention out there for that and looking for those opportunities. You are more likely to find those opportunities and be able to do the thing. So it is a continual aim and re-shooting, realigning to hit the mark. And that you have to understand that, like, sometimes that's a good thing that didn't work out, and to look back and just be like, well, because that didn't happen, what did happen? And you see things that rippled out from that. And it's like, oh, I'm actually grateful that I didn't get to do that at that point. Okay, so here's where we're going to go through the last part that I'll read. And so this is a summary of, he's talking about intelligence intensification. And so he's talking about the progression of the circuits and stuff like that. And so I'll just start here. Why be depressed when you can be happy? Dumb when you can be smart? Agitated when you can be tranquil? Obviously, most people are depressed, dumb, and agitated most of the time because they lack the tools to repair and correct damaged, defective circuits in their nervous system. We are acquiring the tools, and this intelligence intensification has the pleasure principle to fuel it. That is, the more internal freedom you achieve, the more you want. It is more fun to be happy than sad, more enjoyable to choose your emotions than to have them inflicted upon you by mechanical glandular processes, more pleasurable to solve your problems than to be stuck with them forever. In brief, intelligence intensification means intelligence study intelligence, I squared. And the first thing discovered by intelligence studying intelligence, the brain studying the brain, metaprogramming, is that the more types of intelligence you have, the more fun it is to try to develop even more subtle, sensitive, futique levels of awareness, higher intelligence still. In summary, intelligence intensification is desirable because there is not a single problem confronting humanity that is not either caused or considerably worsened by the prevailing stupidity, insensitivity of the species, badly wired robots bumping into and maiming and killing each other. Intelligence intensification is attainable because modern advances in neuroscience are showing us how to alter any imprinted, conditioned, or learned reflex that previously restricted us. Intelligence intensification is hedonic because the more freedom and consciousness you achieve, the more you want, the less willing you are to slip back to dumb, blind, mechanistic circuits. Intelligence intensification can accelerate our progress towards Intelligence intensification can accelerate our progress toward abolition of war and poverty, find cures for cancer and schizophrenia, achieve space migration and life extension, giving us space enough and time enough to achieve even more cosmic levels of awareness, or accomplish any other worthwhile goals. Like death and poverty, stupidity has been around so long that people cannot imagine human life without it, but it is rapidly becoming obsolete. However, many special interest groups, intelligence agencies, so-called advertisers, tyrants, clergy, etc., may profit from stupidity. Humanity as a whole will profit more for its abolition. Approximately 50% of the human race has not fully evolved into the Third Circuit yet. That is, although they can exchange primitive signals and handle primitive artifacts, they are still mostly operating on the mammalian emotional circuit and the pre-mammalian biosurvival circuit. Newt Gingrich is their current leader in the United States. Of course, he wrote this in the 80s. Third Circuit types cannot understand this and regard it as sinister, but it is simple mammalian herd behavior. Gingrich is the typical primate leader. The noises he makes, which appear meaningless to the Third Circuit rationalists, are urgently meaningful to the territorial, emotional, patriotic minds of the majority of primates. Another 20% are responsible, intelligent adults with fully developed Third and Fourth Circuits. They spend most of their time worrying because the predominantly primate parameters of human society seem absurd, immoral, and increasingly dangerous to them. Another 20% are neurosomatic adepts. Fourth Circuit moralists denounce them as mystics, space cases, nuts, the me generation, irresponsible hedonists, etc. Most of the Fifth Circuit adepts, Aquarian conspirators, have heard Joyce's arts of silence, exile, cunning. They are invisible. Others have turned their talents to faith healing or various occult gimmicks of that sort, and very carefully do not tell their clients that the local ideology, morality, and reality tunnel is what made them ill in the first place. They give good energy and sensibly avoid conflict with the moral ideological authorities. Another 5% have neurogenetic consciousness and function as evolutionary agents, servants of the life force. In Shaw's terminology, their god is Pan, and their goal is immortality. Another 3% have mastered the metaprogramming circuit and make up what Gurdjieff called the conscious circle of humanity. They are free masons, in the original meaning of that debased term, co-creators of future realities. Only 2% are neuro-quantum adepts and beyond space-time categories entirely. All these are approximations. The newer circuits, neurosomatic bliss, neurogenetic Atman consciousness, metaprogramming reality games, non-local cosmic awareness, must have some function. We can only assume that they are preparing us for our new situation in space-time, after space colonization, after longevity and immortality, after the acceleration factor accelerates even faster. We'll stop there. So there's just a lot of really interesting things. You can see the heart of what he's trying to push towards, of like recognizing what's going on and what the majority of things are and where he sees humanity at this point. And it's just like there's this thing of like we could just, like there's really not a whole lot that needs to be done, and the same people that are locked in those lower circuits could, rise to the higher circuits. But the conditioning is so strong, and it is so difficult to see through that reality tunnel. So, yeah, this book is fantastic. It is a lot of fun. It's very, very entertaining as far as just jokes and cleverness, so much wit. You can tell he's just a lover of art and reading. and writing in general. And so he's bringing in elements of all these people that you wouldn't expect, be it scientist or poet, and weaves them together to make a narrative out of what is a non-narrative book. And it really is worth the time. So if you get a chance, pick up Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson. If there are any books that are kind of like in this vein that you would be interested in hearing me talk about, let me know. If I have it, I'll read it. If I don't, I'll try and get it, and we'll see what we can do. But I've got plenty in line after this. So thanks for checking this out, and I hope you enjoyed it and get a kick out of the read. Peace.